The following is a presentation of the Maine Department of Education School Finance Team, brought to you by the Maine School Management Association.
Tuition rates. So we were asked to talk a little bit about tuition rates for SAUs that send their kids out and for SAUs that accept students. We calculate 5 different rates. We calculate 3 rates for public schools and 2 rates for private schools. So first we calculate the public elementary tuition rate, which is basically a per pupil expenditure. We take your elementary operating expenditures and we divide that by the average of October 1 and April 1 attending enrollments, and that's the per pupil expenditure rate, and that becomes the public elementary tuition rate for your SAU. And the school board of the sending unit may vote to pay a higher rate. The public secondary tuition rates are a little bit different. Again, we take the per pupil operating costs, but then we times that by what we call an inflation factor, which is the average change in public secondary costs over a 2-year period. We calculate that for every SAU, and then we calculate a state average, and then we go back and look at each SAU and determine if their rate is, their adjusted public secondary cost is higher than the state average. If it is, we assign the state average to that SAU. The lesser amount is known as the maximum allowable tuition, but the sending school board may vote to pay a higher rate. The tuition rates for EUT students for elementary are exactly the same. For secondary, EUT statute removes the restriction of the state average, so EUT students going to an SAU will pay whatever that SAU's average secondary cost is. So public school tuition rate data timeline. So in order to calculate your rates, we need this information. We already have your October data. We already have your April data. We will need your MEF's actual expenditure data before we can calculate any rates. And we have to have everyone's data because we do a state average. So if we don't have everyone's, we can't do anyone's. So that's why we're late sometimes, is because Terry's beating on people to get their data in. Tuition rates for private schools approved for public tuition. Again, we calculated an elementary rate, which is basically the state average elementary public tuition rate. And then we calculate a secondary rate, which is the lesser of the private school cost per student or the average, state average public school tuition rate, whichever is lower. Again, we have a timeline for that. Each private school has to do private school basic school approval in Maine schools. So much like you folks, they have to go in, do Maine schools, they have to answer questions, they have to follow all kinds of different procedures in order to be approved. Then they also have to do another piece where they give us expenditure data and student data so that we can calculate the tuition. A lot of times, we are not able to calculate their tuition rate even further into the school year because they've not completed that that basic school approval piece. So if you're wondering why they haven't, you need to ask them if they've finished that piece. So insured value factor and maximum allowable tuition, these are rates that the private school calculates for themselves. They are defined in statute. We do not calculate them for the private schools, but you can ask them for the information that they use, and they should be able to show you their math for how they came up with these figures. Questions? Again, we have information on our website.
Scan any of the QR codes on your screen. Any questions you have that aren't covered in this video? Go to maine.gov/DOE/funding and click on Contact Us. There you'll find the contacts for the school finance team. Expect a response within 24 to 48 hours. Missed any of the training? Click on any of the videos of the playlist to look back on. Thanks for watching this presentation of the Maine Department of Education's School Finance Team, brought to you by the Maine School Management Association, planting the seeds for Maine's future.